Fellas, it is no secret where we went to school. This is not a Texas A&M podcast, but hot dang, man, it feels really, really good to be an Aggie tonight after all of the trash talk that came from LSU, their players. This feels really good, and it's a complete 180 that we're going to talk about. There's a ton to get into, but take it away, fellas. How are we feeling?
Guys, the second recap show that we ever did followed up a loss to Appalachian State 2 years ago.
That's right.
And I hate to bring that up, but boy, does this feel good. And I'm sorry if you don't like Aggie homerism, you're in the wrong place tonight, baby. Like this is just, it just feels amazing. The vibes are immaculate. I can't wait to just kind of get out around town here in just a little bit. I'm sure it's nuts, a little bit south of me back towards campus. And man, I'm just at a loss for words. I've never seen in a positive way a game turn on its head like that for Texas A&M. And it feels great. 5-0 in the SEC, 7-1 overall. The whole world is right in front of you right now. And it just feels great. Great way to end October.
And the big thing I want to point out with this one, obviously we'll break down the game itself, but a lot of this, and I'm going to give massive credit where it is due, a lot of this is due to Kyle Field. And that's something that a lot of people have talked about, and it's been up and down, and how did this game affect it? This game was not just hey, Marcel Reed showed up and caught lightning in a bottle. That did happen. But what also happened is when the pressure got up, Kyle Field made noise. LSU couldn't handle the pressure. 3 picks. It was a disaster for LSU in that second half. Just an absolute disaster. And that is not because LSU is not a good football team, and that's not because LSU forgot how to play football. It's because Kyle Field finally brought the pressure, and it spiraled. That's just what happened. And so massive shout-out to the fans, massive shout-out to Kyle Field. Shout-out for doing the blackout. I had my black on in solidarity as well. Couldn't be there, but, I was excited for that. So, man, this one's for the fans. This one's for that team. Great win. Fantastic. And now the Aggies are in sole possession of first place in the SEC. And man, that showdown with Texas at the end of the season looks like it might be for just about all the marbles.
Well, without a doubt, the story of this game is the flip in momentum that happens. And we'll start this recap middle of the third quarter. Texas A&M has a chance to come out of the half and get some points. They're down 17-7. They go not 3 and out. They have 5 plays. Not a great start to the third quarter. It felt dead. It felt like, oh my gosh, this is another time where offensively, at least, the moment is too big. We, in our group text, we'd spent the entire first half questioning the offensive scheme, questioning Connor Wegman, who at times just looked incredibly lost. And whether that was due to the coverage or the blitz in his face, a lot of times it was just 4 rushers coming. Things were not gelling for the A&M offense. They were able to run the ball, but how many times can you run counter or inside zone without throwing the ball down the field effectively, right? Garrett Nussmeier throws an interception to BJ Mays, and it was truly the first mistake that he had made all game, rolling to his weak side, to his left, threw the ball back across his body, and he throws an interception to A&M's slot corner, who sets them up with a red zone possession. Marcel Reed then trots out at quarterback, and it takes one play, 8 yards on a read option, and it was off and running. It was like it was a different ball game at that point. So, Trey, start with you and talk about Marcel Reed, talk about Colin Klein. What stood out to you once that quarterback change was made?
Once the change was made, it was like LSU had to play a completely different team. It was a completely different offensive scheme playing to Marcel Reed's strengths. And hats off to the LSU defensive staff and that whole side of the ball for LSU, because they had Connor Wegman schemed perfectly. Everybody's going to point to Connor Wegman. Did he look a little timid at times? Yeah, absolutely he did. Did it look like he could have pulled the ball and ran a few times with some wide open spaces? Sure did. Don't know if that's a coaching thing. Don't know if that's a lack of just instinct to go. Not sure what that is. I'm not going to speculate on that. But LSU had him schemed perfectly. They were getting pressure with 4 guys, like you mentioned. And when you can do that, you can drop 7 back into a zone. And you're doing that against typically 4, maximum 5 guys out there running a route. It's a numbers game at that point. They have talented athletes that can play a disciplined zone. and they took away everything the Aggies wanted to do when Connor Wegman was in. There was no adjustment from A&M while Connor Wegman was in either. We kept asking our group text, where's the stuff over the middle? Where's the quick hitters? It looked like they were trying to get that going in the second half, but even then, Connor Wegman hit a couple guys in the hands and drops. If it wasn't one thing, it was another while he was in. But then Reed comes in, and it's just an absolute spark. And it's not the same after that. LSU looked like a team that didn't get to prepare for that type of offense all week. It's kind of the inverse of what we saw when A&M played Missouri, right?
Yep.
We saw Missouri prepare for Marcel Reed all week long, and then when Connor Wegman trots out there, they have no idea what to do against a guy that can chuck the ball downfield a little bit more. So kind of the inverse. There's only so much time you can spend preparing. You don't have time to prepare for two quarterbacks fully over the course of a week of practice. But man, it was the right adjustment at the right time. Kudos to Mike Elko and Colin Klein and company for making the call, sticking with it, and just having the guts to do it, because it doesn't always work when you make that change. We saw it last week in Austin. Sark tries to give a spark with Arch. Arch turns it over as well. You get the meme with the two of them shell-shocked on the sidelines. But in this instance, it does work because schematically, it's just an almost completely different offense. It feels like Colin Klein is right at home calling plays for Marcel Reed, and he might not know what to do as well with a guy like Connor Wegman, his skill set.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think what was so fascinating was you go back and look at the box score. Marcel Reed threw 2 passes once he came in, a short one, and then he threw a long one right down the seam.
18 run plays, 2 passes while he was in, if you don't count the kneel downs.
I mean, that is unreal given how effective it was. But you're right, Trey. I mean, we've seen, especially in the SEC, we've seen this not work, right? South Carolina, because of injuries, had to go to Robbie Ashford. No spark to the offense. Oklahoma, whatever the heck they're doing with their quarterback situation.
That one definitely didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, you go outside the conference, you go to the Big Ten, Michigan's quarterback trifecta. It's the same song, different verse, but it worked for Texas A&M. And we saw Marcel Reed lead the Aggies to, what was it, a 3-0 record while Connor Wegman was nursing that shoulder injury, right? He came in and he got it done. Was it always pretty? No, absolutely not. But Trey, you even sent a text when he hit that deep throw to Noah Thomas. It was like, oh my gosh, Marcel Reed finally connected on a deep pass. And I think that one attempt down the field kept the safeties back. It made the corners have to stay engaged, and it prevented LSU from entirely selling out to the run, because at that point, for a little bit, they're obviously trying to hold off the Aggies, and then the switch flips, and suddenly they're down. And then they really can't just commit to the run, because the second they do that, A&M throws it over the top. Boom, it's gone for 7. But Marcel Reed comes in after that interception from BJ Mays. He goes 5 for 5 on scoring drives for the Aggies. I mean, truly a night and day difference.
200 yards on 22 plays for him when he was running the offense before they kneeled down. And go ahead. So I'll just throw in real quick, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Mitch, but the 200 yards on 22 plays before that, just 176 yards for Texas A&M when Connor Wegman was in. And like I said, it just completely changed what LSU had to do on defense. It played against their strengths, and you can't scheme against what Marcel Reed was doing in that read option game. That second touchdown, I think that he had, where it looked like a fumble because of how long he kept it in Amari Daniels' gut and then pulled it out the last second. Just a magician with what he was doing with the football.
It truly was Ace's or Joker's wild for Marcel Reed. I mean, he came in and the confusion was evident on the LSU players' faces, on the coaches' faces. They did not know how to react to a true mystery box that Mike Elko rolled out there. The other thing I was going to say was how much of a lift to the A&M defense was that competent offensive play, right? You get the spark on one side of the ball and it ignites the other side. I was so concerned that, yes, A&M's defense was making some mistakes, but we were about to watch what's happened to teams like South Carolina and Oklahoma, where they have really good defenses. And in a vacuum, that unit might even be the best unit on the field. but you roll it out there in combination with an offense that is anemic, that can't sustain drives, that is constantly putting their counterpart back on the football field, and eventually they run out of gas. And you could see that in the A&M pass rushers, right? They didn't get a sack on Garrett Nussmeier until the fourth quarter. They kept getting close over and over and over again, but because LSU was running that short passing game, because they could run the RPOs, they could get it out to the flats, or quick hitters over the middle like that Anderson touchdown that went for 76 yards or whatever it was. A&M pass rush couldn't quite get home. And I was so scared that A&M was about to waste another really solid performance. I mean, guys, they gave up 24 yards rushing total in this game. Caden Durham, who was an X factor and who's been a home run hitter for the Tigers these last couple of weeks, he couldn't do anything in this game. You had him stuffed at the line of scrimmage, but for a little bit, it looked like it wasn't going to matter because of what that LSU passing game was going to do. I feel great for those 11 guys, and obviously all the rotational guys as well. But they did so much better, I feel like, as a team, as a unit, than what I thought the final result was going to lead to. And they still give up 1 billion yards passing. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier throws for, I think, 405 in a losing effort, 2 touchdowns, but the 3 interceptions. And we can transition to that. Garrett, I'll feed you the rock here. The adjustments made by Mike Elko in this defense at second half took a unit in the LSU offense that was entirely in control, that got whatever they wanted, and suddenly stymied them on just about every single drive. I think LSU scored 1 touchdown in the second half? That's it. They scored once.
Yeah, and you have to give him massive credit, because obviously you talked about how Reed coming in kind of provided that spark, but I think it was just a whole, kind of like what I said, it kind of spiraled at Kyle Field, right? The crowd kind of got back into it, and people are, getting excited again. That gives them a little bit more juice when the defense is out there. And when you're a defense and you got your home crowd coming out behind you like that, you're going to play with that extra step, right? And when you keep getting thrown back on the field after a short drive from your offense, that gets demoralizing, and you start to feel like you have to scramble. And if you're on the back end and a guy's in space, you got to go, blow it up, make a big play. And that's where you make mistakes. And for a long time during that game in that first half, Nussmeier was getting pressured, and he was just stepping up in the pocket, finding the guy over the middle. There were, coverage lapses or miscommunications or, all sorts of different things going wrong for A&M. And Nussmeier just took advantage of it for a long time in that first half. But the problem was when that crowd got back into it and they started just playing their football again, that's where things really started to fall apart. You saw Nussmeier scrambling a lot in that second half because he was having to actually get outside of the pocket and try to extend a play and make something happen because they were staying more sound and because the coverage was holding up on the backside. And, in a couple of those plays, BJ Mays with a freaking game, right? 2 picks. The first one, he kind of baits him into it. Second one, it just kind of is an underthrown ball, a little bit late towards the sideline, and he's able to undercut the route and go with it. And then, even just to get, more into the fact that I think what happened is Nuss got in his head. He did not see Torian York on that 3rd interception. That was just supposed to be a little leak out to the running back. Torian York picks it immediately, sees what's happening, floats out towards that running back, stays low, and then just gets in front of it to make the play. Garrett Nussmeier got in his head. At the end of I don't think you can convince me otherwise. He felt the pressure. He felt that people are starting to come at him. I know he was a little bit hobbled towards the end of that half. That might have had something to do with it, right? Maybe not wanting to step up into the pocket with a little bit of an injured ankle, but end of the day, defense got after it. And as much as Marcel Reed provided that spark, you still ended up winning this game going 31-6 in the second half. I don't know if I'm more impressed with the fact that A&M's offense scored 31 in the second half or that the defense gave up 6 to I still think, really good LSU offense that, was still moving the ball, just couldn't string drives together because that defense finally came to play.
Well, and so much of that, I think, was credit to the adjustments that Jay Bateman and Mike Elko made defensively in the second half. I told you guys the defense looked very bland, very cookie cutter in that first half. Yes, A&M would bring blitzes, but it didn't look creative. It looked like everyone had their lane and they stayed in that. It was all very right in front of the Aggies. In the second half, you started to see the stunts. You started to see the blindside blitzes. And that, I think, really contributed to Nussmeier suddenly not feeling like he was in control. You went from a guy who was stepping into throws and very, very confidently delivering the ball downfield to suddenly he's having to take an extra second to make sure what he's seeing is actually correct. And that was the difference. You hesitate for half a second with A&M's pass rush, just like Connor Wegman was doing against LSU's pass rush, and the play's over. Suddenly that window's closed, the blitzer gets there, and the play is over. I just think that so much of that is going to go maybe untalked about because the story is going to be Marcel Reed, and as he should be. He's probably going to be on our thumbnail for the podcast and the YouTube videos. I mean, he deserves that. But this A&M defense impressed the heck out of me. I do want to turn it over to LSU's side. Nussmeier throws 3 interceptions. Garrett, you talked about Kyle Field. He obviously has the infamous clip from June where he says that Kyle Field's not that loud. He kind of backed off of that this week in media availability, said, no, it's a good place to play. But what an effort I thought in that first half for LSU to try and take the crowd out of it. The wide receivers, when they're healthy, boy, Kyron Lacey, CJ Daniels, Austin Anderson, they look dynamic. LSU's not out of the playoff race. They suffer their first conference loss, their second loss overall. Trey, for LSU, what do you see from them that, one, I think gives you hope that they can still make the playoff, and 2, that they need to clean up if they want to play in the postseason?
It's kind of both sides of a double-edged sword for me because they're awesome at the big plays. They can make a man miss. We talked about a lot about Nuss throwing the ball downfield, and that was lacking in his game against Arkansas. But those talented receivers can make a guy miss, or Caden Durham can get loose in the open field, and it can be a big play touchdown really quickly. We saw that tonight with the big 70-yard touchdown. I think they had 5 or 6 plays for over 20 yards in the first half. So you can certainly see that, but the other side of that is they really, really struggle in tight spaces and in the red zone in particular. Mm-hmm. After they crossed the 50-yard line, even in the first half when they were having a lot of success, they had to settle for 4 field goal attempts. 3 of those were botched, right? Yeah. Either bad holds or a shanked kick or the snap miscommunication that we saw that will get me into infinity with the Jim face of the holder. But man, they have to find a way to be more successful in plus territory. They can get there and they can put up a lot of yards and a lot of chunk plays. But if they keep bringing field goals while the other team's scoring touchdowns, it's going to get them in trouble in some of these bigger games down the stretch. Their schedule even loosens up a little bit. I know they have Alabama next week, but that's going to be a massive, probably playoff elimination game. But yeah, I mean, that's the biggest red flag to me. Much is going to be made about LSU's mistakes tonight, by the way. A&M made just as many, if not more, mistakes in this game and still found a way to win between the penalties, the stupid personal fouls, the missed opportunities on offense in the first half. So I think it all kind of comes out in a wash, but that's just this thing that we've seen long-term for LSU that hasn't gone away.
Well, and I do want to talk about the mistakes for A&M here in just a second. You mentioned the special teams nightmares. That was a killer. I think also not being able to convert in the red zone goes back to not being able to run the ball. They were one-dimensional, and that works when the field is elongated, right? When you can spread the secondary out, but as soon as it compresses and you got to fight in a phone booth, LSU has really struggled with that all season long. There's no doubt that they have to get that cleaned up, as well as just the ability to win close games and stay focused in the second half. The noise for Kyle Field finally got to them. The environment, the pressure from that pass rush finally got to them. This is the Brian Kelly song and dance that we go through with LSU every single year. That's why he pounded the table against in the loss after the USC game, was because this team, and traditionally his teams, have a little bit of an issue closing down ball games. So
they played that clip at the perfect time in the broadcast too. It just added to the vibe so much. And you'll talk about the pass rush getting home, Mitch. LSU had allowed 2 sacks all season in this game prior to this game, and A&M got 2 tonight. So literally doubled their sack total on the year.
Yeah. Garrett, there's a question in the chat about A&M and Texas both getting into the playoff. I kind of want to we'll talk playoffs, and we can weave it in throughout this episode. But Trey, you mentioned the penalties, the mistakes from Texas A&M. As we kind of transition to what's in front of the Aggies here, it's 5-0 in the SEC for the first time ever. It is first place alone in the Southeastern Conference, and the most inside of all tracks to Atlanta to an SEC championship game. That being said, there's still 3 really tough games in front of you: at South Carolina, at Auburn, home against the University of Texas in the biggest rivalry game, I think, this season, certainly given the stakes, right? Texas A&M found a way to win a game that was very losable. That is something that they have not done in years past. But the mistakes nearly cost them chances to do that. The personal foul penalties, the over-aggressive behavior from like Shamar Turner after the play is done, holding, offsides, false starts, you name it. Texas A&M made one of those penalties tonight. They had a targeting call, for goodness sakes,
on a wide receiver,
on just a good
On
old-fashioned on just a good old-fashioned block.
I just completely disagree with the call, but that's a whole separate thing.
That being said, Texas A&M has quite a bit to get cleaned up. And I'll say this, I think if there's one thing that's going to hold the Aggies back, it's going to be those penalties, because time and time again, we watch them make the same procedural penalties. And that may be the most frustrating part of this whole season.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with learning a new offense still. There's a lot more motion than they had in Jimbo Fisher's offense. So they got to figure that out. A lot of it's procedural, but yeah, 10 for 97, got to get that cleaned up. It does seem like a recurring problem that they have to do. And a lot of it is just over celebration, it feels like. How many times have they been called for something stupid after a big play this year?
Yep.
It's just overemphasizing the effort. Like, like we were talking about Armage just kind of being sloppy. And, I think Turner had the sloppy where he just kind of pushed the guy or whatever. It's like, it's just getting too into the moment. And I love the chip on the shoulder. I love that they want to play with energy. They want to play with passion. Like, that's something that you want out of, any team that you're playing, especially on the defensive side. You want guys that are going to come in there and hit guys and feel good about that. Like, again, Jade, even on the offensive side, like, he gets called for a blindside block where he's going in to seal a guy in the run game. He got a guy knocked on his butt, and he goes, okay, well, I guess that you hit him too hard, and that's a penalty or something. I'm okay with that from just an effort standpoint. I'd rather you do that than, like, go in there a little bit soft and then not make the play. Like, if the refs are going to make a call like that, the refs are going to make a call like that, but it's cleaning up the little extra push at the very end, or like right at the end of the play, they blow the whistle, and then you're like, nah, let me just finish this block a little extra aggressive. You can't do that. You just can't do that kind of thing. Well,
so let's go ahead and I'll give you guys the last word here. If there's anything else on Texas A&M LSU, now's the time, because I think this is actually a pretty good transition into Texas and Vanderbilt. I know they weren't one of our big three, but I think there's a pretty natural transition the way that the chat is going right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say this is a scenario that I want to kind of paint for the Aggies. I want to give you a blind look at this game. Don't even think about the outcome. The opposing team threw for 400 yards and you completed 8 passes, and you won a football game, and you're 7-1 leading the SEC.
15 points.
By 15 points, you won this game. And you had 1 sack in this game. Like, if I told you those stats in a blind room, or Tuesday was the 1 sack late in the game, and whatever. But you finished with 2 sacks. You get, if I told you blindly, you have 2 sacks in this game, and they're going to throw for 400 yards, and you're only going to complete 8 passes, Aggies are going to be like, well, it was year 1, and, we're still building, and it's okay. Mike Elko, he's going to get the program right. You can't expect him, and the moment was too big and all that. And instead, you get to say, hey, look, we got lots of stuff to work on in College Station. You got to get the penalties cleaned up. You got to figure out the pass game a little bit. You got to get, certain receivers going and involved. You got to, find ways to start faster. You got to, especially on the defensive side, find ways to clamp down earlier. But you get to learn those things and work on those things, being 7-1, 5-0 in conference, and, vaulting towards a playoff spot.
Yeah, winning is a skill. Winning is a skill. It's a skill that the team has not had for the last decade, and it's really nice to see it return. Yeah, Trey.
I had one more thought. I'll save it for Monday. It's a good Monday show thought. So tune in on Monday to the live show.
Yeah, there you go. 3 Tech Takeout.
Gracious him. How about that?